Hello and a very warm welcome to the late-breaking F1 podcast with Harry Eade, Ben Hocking and me, Samuel Sage. That's weird. The wrong way around, isn't it? Anyway, this is a short view back to the past, our new series where we're going to be talking historic moments across several seasons. The first season being famous rivalries. And today we're going to be talking Prenger. It's a good start.
Not even a minute in.
We're going to be talking Senna versus Prost on their couple name, Prenger. That's a now known. Thank you for joining us. It's going well already, as you can tell. I've written the entire script, and as we go through, I'll be speaking to the guys and asking them some questions about, certain moments, highlights, debate points, and they'll be weighing in, of course, with their classic stuff as a fly. Thank you. Good. Anyway, looking forward to this. Boys, how are you both feeling about the first episode of, a short view back to the past?
I bet Ben, you go first.
The intro by itself was worth it. I was pretty scared heading into this, like handing over the reins of the intro to Sam, but actually, just based on Brenner, it's all worth it.
All right. Our story starts in, it's a long time ago, 1955, in a little commune called Alain near... What?
Sorry, that was...
Interrupting on the first line.
I won't do any more, that was it.
Worth it. I would have done it if he didn't.
I didn't even hear what you said.
So it's when you were born.
Basically, the joke's you're old.
Right, sorry, go.
Our story starts in 1955 in a little commune called Lorette, near the town of Saint-Chamond. A little boy who would come to be known as the Professor was born, or, as we all know him, Alain Prost. His father, Andre, manufactured kitchen furnishings, and you could say that Alain came from a very normal home for a boy of his time. It has been said that Alain was a very energetic young lad who would throw himself into different sports constantly, ranging from wrestling, rollerblading and football. The latter he committed so heavily on the pitch that he ended up breaking his nose several times. It was only when the family had gone on holiday to the south of France with Alain when he was 14 years old that he discovered go-karting. 14 years old to begin karting is incredibly late for Formula One drivers of the current age, but Alain quickly picked up the necessary skills in order to be mighty fast on the track. It began as just a fun hobby, but by 19 years old, Alain had made the decision to drop out of school completely in order to focus on his racing. Alain will fix up old engines and distribute karts in order to support his passion for racing. Of course, working with a multitude of engines helped Alain to understand what made them tick and gave him an advantage in gaining performance, especially when speaking to engineers later on in his career. Just 1 year later, in 1975, Alain had won the French Senior Karting Championship, and the prize was nothing to be sniffed at. He had been awarded a season in Formula Renault. The support in France for young racers at the time was much further ahead than the grassroots options in some other countries that regularly fielded top-level drivers. In his first season of Formula Renault in 1976, he won every single race bar one, and beat the next closest challenger by 38 points. He repeated this success in 1977, taking home the title in back-to-back years, but there was another step to consider before Formula One teams were to come calling. That was Formula 3. Alain, much like Formula Renault before it, competed in 2 seasons of Formula 3 back-to-back. In 1978, Alain won the French Formula 3 title at the first time of asking, but at the same time, the European Formula 3 Championship had come calling, and Alain entered just 2 Grand Prix in his first season, meaning he finished 9th overall. And 9th for Alain simply wasn't good enough. In 1979, Alain entered both the French Formula 3 and European Formula 3 Championships. Across both championships, Alain entered 15 races, winning 11 times. There were only 2 races across both championships that Alain wasn't on the podium for at all. At the end of 1975, Alain had claimed both titles, and there was nothing more that he could do to attract the big names of Formula One. Luckily for him, they had been keeping an eye on young Alain, and now he was firmly on the shopping list of many teams. In 1980, Alain signed for McLaren, but we'll dive into that a little further on. First question, chaps, to chat into here. What did you make of Prost's late start to racing? Ben, you want to kick us off? It was quite late, wasn't it, even for standard drivers of today's age?
Yeah, I guess it was more common back then, but certainly if you're looking at modern day Formula One, getting into racing at that age is incredibly uncommon. The only example I can think of recently is Nicholas Latifi. I think Latifi started racing around the same time as Prost did, and we know, despite Latifi getting to Formula One and being a competent driver, he struggled at that level. And it's not easy when you've got the likes of, try and pick out a couple that are on the current grid, Lando Norris, I think maybe Esteban Ocon, they're starting racing at about 5 years old. Like you can't understate the 10 years or so gap in experience and how much that does for a driver at that age, just getting the fundamentals correct. So given, and you'll go into how successful Prost became, obviously, but given what he achieved in the sport, given that he had anything but a head start, it just makes it all the more impressive.
Indeed. I mean, there's a lot of things at 27, 28 years old that we struggle to do normally day to day. So when you start racing at 5, it's quite impressive. Harry was quite late into the sport, wasn't he? What do you think about that?
Yeah, it's quite. I didn't know that fact, so thank you.
We're all here to learn.
Thank you.
Every day's a school day.
Yes. Surprising, very surprising, and also when you're a 4 or 5-year-old, you're learning a skill. It's like ingrained for life. When I was skiing the other day.
Right, bougie.
I know.
Oh, look at me! I'm a skier.
Skiing.
I could go down a snowy hill.
I mean, I fell over and hurt my leg, but anyway.
Harry skied.
There were lots of 4 and 5-year-olds having ski lessons who were whizzing past me. And my point is, there is an actual point here. You know, they'll have that skill for life. Oh yeah, sorry. Apart from that point, it's 2 points. But they'll have those skills for life, and it's the same for those drivers that started karting when they're 4 or 5. It's like it's ingrained in them, and I'm sure it is still an element of that when you're 14, but I can imagine it's a lot more difficult. So it's quite impressive that.
For me, eating chicken nuggets is what's ingrained from 4 or 5 years old.
We know.
Yeah, good. The second point that stood out to me from when I was doing my research on this early point in Prost's career is the awarding of a drive in a more senior formula as a prize, as part of the prize. That doesn't really happen anymore. Harry, what do you think about being given a drive in a more senior formula for winning the junior formula?
It's a good idea.
Yeah, funny that, isn't it?
I think they should do that in F2, to be honest.
Makes sense.
Yeah. But you don't want to just be gifted drives, or we don't always want drivers to have to pay for their drives. So it feels like that's quite a fair way of doing it, especially if that driver doesn't come from a huge backing. If they're good, they win a seat in the next level. So, well, what formula was it again?
That's Formula Renault up to Formula 3.
Well done, Formula. Who initiated it?
I don't know. I haven't done that much research. I'm not Ben.
Well done, Formula Renault or Formula 3.
Well done.
Slash both of you.
Speaking of Ben, what are your thoughts on this?
Speaking of that guy, I really wish it was more of a thing, because it should be based on merit when you're being elevated up the formula pyramid, if you like. So I would absolutely love that to be in place far more than it is right now. That sounds like a great idea. And you just avoid the likes of, Mahavir Raghunathan getting to Formula 2, right? Because there's no way any of his results implied he should have been there. We're certainly at a stage now, at least Formula 2 to Formula 1, where I think every champion at Formula 2 level for the last 7 or 8 years has got to Formula 1, which is great. But we had a period of time, sort of the early 2010s, where Formula 2 champions weren't getting into Formula 1. I think there was a period of about 3 or 4 years where the likes of Sam Bird and Fabio Lima were winning the championship at F2 level and not getting to Formula 1. And that might come back around and present itself as the case again, in the next couple of years. So I hope that there is some way to get that installed in the current way of working.
Let us know what you think, folks. It is a very interesting story that no longer happens anymore. Anyway, moving on. In 1981, just as Alain Prost ending his debut year in Formula 1, Irishman Ralph Furman Sr. was preparing for another year with his Van Diemen race team in the British Formula 4 Championship. During the 70s and 80s, this series was considered a major stepping stone on the path to Formula 1, and since entering in 1973, Furman's team wanted glory. Whilst there was a lot of Sunday drivers in the competition racing for fun, Van Diemen had won 5 Formula 4 titles and 4 Formula 4 festivals. For these looking to get into the sport, this was the team to race for. The problem with this is that a season with Van Diemen would set you back a cool £20,000, which today, I worked it out, is about 75 grand. It's a lot of money, right, for a youngster at that level. Thank you. It took a quick Google. Wasn't a lot.
Well, still well done.
Thank you. When looking for a new driver for the 1981 season, Furman conversed with current Formula 1 driver Chico Serra and made the decision to bring a young Brazilian on board who was searching for the right place to make his racing car debut. Coming from the karting scene, where the youngster had won everything bar the World Karting Championship, the Brazilian displayed all the skills needed to achieve racing greatness. Obviously, we're talking about Ayrton Senna. Well, actually back then he was known as Ayrton Senna da Silva, not as catchy. Hailing from Sao Paulo, Senna had already built up a reputation in the surrounding area as someone to keep an eye on in the motor racing world. Senna had picked up multiple karting championships in Brazil and then progressed, winning everything he could across South America. This is where Ayrton moved to Europe with the goal of winning the World Karting Championship. Unlike Prost, Senna had developed rivalries along his journey to coming into Formula One. Ayrton could never take the title, twice finishing runner-up in both 1979 and in 1980, and both times he lost to karting legend known as Terry Fullerton. Ayrton, when interviewed later in his career, went on to describe Terry as the greatest motor racing rival he ever had. A fun fact about Terry is that he still has the kart he used to be Ayrton in both seasons. That's nice, isn't it? Little souvenir.
I love there's a racing driver called Terry.
It was good as well.
Yeah. And that's even better. He's called Terry, and he was good.
Every time someone came over to my house, I'd point at it on the wall and go, you know that right there? Beat Ayrton Senna in that 2 years in a row.
I'm also, sorry to interrupt you, I'm also shook at Ralph Furman Sr., so I'm guessing that's Ralph Furman's dad, as in the one who raced in Jordan.
Correct.
I never knew that.
You're learning something in every paragraph.
I feel like I am back at school.
Good. Professor Sam is here. Anyway, back to the story. Unless, Ben, you want to chime in with anything lovely?
No, other than the Fullerton interview, or the Senna interview about Fullerton, where he gives that answer, is epic. It typifies exactly who Senna was, that he had so many great rivals in his career, many of which you're going to come on to, and obviously we're focusing here on his rivalry with Prost, but the fact that he detailed that as his greatest rivalry really tells you everything you need to know about him as a racing driver. Yeah,
agreed. If you're enjoying the story, listen to its end first, of course, and then maybe go away and feel free to YouTube that, because it is out there. But finish this one first, please. It's the first one we're doing. As Senna's time in karts came to an end, his family back in Brazil had requested multiple times to give up his silly little hobby and get on with university. But after just 3 months, in 1980, he quit his studies and flew back to England, where he settled in Eton, Norwich. The funny thing about Ayrton is he didn't speak a word of English at this point, so all he was able to eat were eggs for several months. And he tried to learn English watching terrible 80s television, mainly shows like Fawlty Towers. And if you've ever seen Fawlty Towers, I'd argue it's maybe not the best place to try and learn, your standard English. Regardless...
Acceptable English.
Regardless, after a test with Furman and the Van Diemen team, they managed to come to an agreement of £10,000 for the season, and Senna became a works driver in 1981. Hilariously, all his mechanics could not really understand him or his name, so they just referred to him as Harry for the year.
Good name.
Right? Good pick.
Harry Senna.
Ayrton Senna da Silva, Harry.
Why not?
There's got to be something there. Like, what? Harry?
Hilarious. Ridiculous and
awful name. Terrible name.
Correct. The worst of at least 3 names I can think of off the top of my head.
Shut up, Ben.
Anyway, back to it. Oh, the soundboard's spoken.
Sorry.
Can't be trusted.
He just remembered he's got control of it now.
Yeah. Right. Senna had never raced in cars like British Formula 4 before. He was 21 and a rookie. The team said to him that this season will be about trying to stick with your teammates and to learn as much as you can. In race 1, Ayrton finished 5th, and both his teammates were comfortably ahead. But we all know just how good this youngster was going to be. 5th place was the worst position he would achieve for the rest of the season. In Thruxton, he picked up his first podium, and then immediately in the next round, he took his first victory in Brands Hatch. Overall in this season, Senna won 12 of the 20 races and ended up winning the championship on debut. What happened next, though, will really surprise you. When interviewed on the podium for the final race of the season, that's right, Harry, it will shock you, Ayrton was asked what is he looking to do next. To everyone's surprise, he quit. This came as a huge shock to everyone in the racing community. Senna chose this route for 2 reasons. He had married early, and the racing was one of the reasons that his marriage was failing. The other, more pressing reason is what plagues most drivers: the availability of cold, hard cash. He returned to Brazil and had almost accepted the prospect that he wouldn't go back to racing, especially as Brazil was in an economic crisis at the time, and all the sponsors available were looking at Formula One. But by February 1982, he decided he couldn't give up on his dream. Basically, he convinced his really wealthy dad to finance his racing moving forward. Makes sense, right? In the 1982 season, Senna signed with the Russian Green Racing Team and entered into both British and European Formula 2000 championships. A seat at the team went for £40,000 a year, but Senna had managed to grab it for only 30. How? Well, Russian, the team owner, had made a light-hearted comment that if Senna were to come race for him next season, he could have it at the cut price of £10,000. But Senna took that seriously. So they had to haggle. They met at the 30k mark, and Senna's dad coughed up the cash. In 1982, Senna won more than 78% of races that he entered, bringing home both the British and European Formula titles. Again, pretty good. Anyway, here's a quick little story of a race, just to tell you how talented Senna was at this young age. In Snetterton, Senna was leading by quite some margin, and then all of a sudden, he drops way down to 7th place. Way down. The team were incredibly focused about. Focused is not the right word either. So you throw me off my last.
Sorry, Prana.
God, the team were incredibly confused. Is what I meant to say about what was going on. What had happened is that a piece of debris had cut Senna's front brake line, so he was racing only on his rear brakes. Senna's teammate in this time had now gone to have a 15-second lead over the rest of the field, until Senna adjusted the roll bar to its softest setting, and essentially decided he was going to race the car like it was a go-kart. And amazingly, Senna passed the entire grid and managed to beat his teammate. Senna's teammate after the race reportedly asked him how he could improve his driving, and Senna replied, "Brake later. I was braking later than you, and I had no brakes."
A man of our own hearts.
Yeah, if he was here, he'd be on the show.
Yeah.
At this point, F1 teams began to take notice of Ayrton, and Ron Dennis at McLaren offered him a test seat, with an option for a race seat later in his career if he were to impress. Senna said no. He wanted a place on the grid immediately, so the next step up to prove himself to attain this is Formula 3, which at the time was considered to be the most prestigious junior racing series worldwide. Our favourite man, Eddie Jordan, was the first person to offer Senna a drive. He had so much faith in him that he gave him a test in his Formula 3 team for free. Within 20 laps, Senna had lapped the Silverstone Club circuit faster than anyone had ever raced that layout, and then told the team how they could go even faster. Cheeky git. But Ayrton wanted the best, so he ignored Eddie Jordan's calls to come and drive for him and moved to the West Surrey Racing Team, but only after getting the 110 grand entry fee from his dad and sponsors, which he needed to race. It was at this point that Ayrton Senna da Silva dropped the latter part of his name and became simply known as Ayrton Senna. This is where Senna's second rivalry began before we even get close to Prost, and at the start of the season, in round 1, everyone turned up with the ultimate expectation that Senna would walk over the pack. Best car, best team, and now the best young driver. And Senna somehow didn't actually grab pole, but it didn't matter in that first race because he dominated the race and won it comfortably. And he did the same at round 2 in Thruxton, round 3 in Silverstone, round 4, round 5, round 6, round 7, round 8, and round 9, Senna went on to get pole position, fastest lap, and win the race. The domination was almost unbelievable, but it was also what Senna had expected of himself and his team. So at this point, Senna basically didn't need to win again. This season in order to secure him the title was done and dusted. He thought, I'm good, back in the top spot again. The league was almost unbeatable. When I say almost, I mean almost. Round 10 in Silverstone, it all starts going down the toilet for Ayrton. Weirdly at this race, the British and European Championship grids all got mixed together. It was a very odd concept, but each championship ran a different tyre manufacturer. Basically, the drivers were given an option on what tyre they wanted to choose. Every driver just chose the fastest one, regardless of where points were coming. And that included Ayrton Senna as well. He just wanted the fastest tyre. But it wasn't Senna that ended up taking the spoils on that day in Silverstone. It was the man who was driving Eddie Jordan's car, the very car that Senna had tested. It was a man who you all know today as the voice of Formula 1, the king of grid walks. That's right. It was Martin Brundle. Brundle picked up pole and the wing while Senna crashed out. You on my corner here ain't helping me.
Why'd you keep putting two words together?
Mate, it's a nervous thing, all right? It's my first time doing a real script. It's scary.
When are we getting on to Prenna?
You're doing a great...
Well, Brenner's coming, mate. Brenner's coming. Anyway, Brundle picked up pole, thank you, and the wing while Senna had crashed out. And this was a pivotal swing in the championship for Brundle. The next round, Senna crashes out in qualifying, can't start the race. Guess who wins it? Brundle. The round after this, Senna and Brundle collide, going wheel to wheel, and Senna for the third time running has to retire from the race, but Brundle, he wins for the third time on the bounce. Senna and Brundle picked up one more win each into the next round, and Dick Bennett, who ran West Surrey Racing, was getting rather nervous as that huge points lead that Senna had was starting to slip away. Senna was going for his aggressive style driving, regularly putting his car in a position where the other driver either yields to Ayrton or they crash. But Brundle decided he wasn't going to do that anymore, and when Senna went for a daring move that really wasn't on, Martin just didn't back down. A huge crash happens and both drivers go out. Senna only wins one of the next 4 races, while Brundle picks up the other 3. Because of this, Brundle was technically beating Senna going into the final race by 1 point. But because British F3 had this weird rule where you had to drop your 3 best results from your points tally, it meant that Brundle had to get pole, fastest lap, and the race win in order to beat Senna for the championship. Unfortunately for Martin, he didn't do a single one of those things. Senna dominated every single moment of the weekend, and he became the 1983 British Formula 3 champion. He also went on to win Macau that year without any practice or even doing the track walk, which is just showing off, quite frankly. He won everything in his junior career that he physically could get his hands on. Ben, Senna was no stranger to rough on-track rivals. And do you think that this fight with Brundle really prepared him for what was coming with the likes of Prost?
Yes, yeah, it did, and I think he needed that before he got to Formula One, because he was so naturally gifted that there was a risk in his junior career that he wouldn't have the sort of rivalry. And it looked, as you rightly say, it looked like halfway through that season he wasn't going to even have that in that year. So I think it was a really important step in Senna's career. And you think of the amount of races he did sort of that you went through there in those couple of years at the likes of Brands Hatch and Snetterton. Like, it's no surprise that those cold, damp circuits as they can be really prepared him for what was to come in his Formula One days, and he really excelled in the sort of conditions that you mentioned there that he had in his junior career.
And Harry, obviously, he went up against Brundle. Brundle, of all people. I don't think a lot of people saw Brundle have it in him, really.
Legend.
Absolute
legend. I mean, not to make this about Martin Brundle, but his...
It can be.
Well, can do. But his F1 career, not motorsport, he was very successful in sports cars, but his F1 career was like a career of what could have been. Because I think he could have won at least won a few races. Anyway, it's interesting the bit about Senna always putting his car in a position where you either get out the way or we're going to have a crash. And do not come after me, everyone.
Oh, no.
But does this remind you of a certain Mr. Verstappen?
Maybe.
Don't shut up, Ben.
Good.
But that style. Shut up. That style of racing, I'm not saying it's correct, but it's that very aggressive, putting your car in a position where you have to back down, as in the opponent has to back down. And if you don't, we're going to have an accident, and then it's your fault, which we've seen, at least with Verstappen and Hamilton, happen quite a lot. So that was quite interesting. But
went on to achieve greatness as well, so maybe there's something in it.
Brundle is Lewis Hamilton, is what we're saying there.
Correct. Great comparison.
Thank you.
Another question to this is, Ben, what do you make of Senna's junior career in comparison to Prost's more stripped-back, refined, and almost accelerated junior career? It was very efficient how Prost ran things. Do you think that gave them any difference in balance when coming into Formula One, or do you think the preparation was as it should be?
That's an interesting question. Certainly Prost didn't have time on his side, because even with his accelerated career, as already mentioned, the fact that he started at 14 years old meant that he was, around mid-20s when he did come into Formula One with McLaren in 1980, whereas Senna, I guess, had the luxury of building up a little bit more to a Formula One career. So I guess, I think having those battles with Brundle, having those battles with Fullerton, I think they probably really helped by the time Senna got to Formula One, whereas maybe Prost needed that in his early years. Prost needed those in his later years in his junior career rather than going straight in 1980.
Any thoughts?
My only thought there is that Ayrton Senna became one of the greatest F1 drivers of all time because he had big battles with two guys named Terry and Martin.
That's how anyone succeeds.
If that's a lesson for you out there, if you're starting karting, make sure you find a Terry.
Anything, not just karting.
If you're starting anything, find a Terry and a Martin to have a massive battle. And have them.
And learn. Right, good. We'll crack on with the next portion of the story and hope that I don't mess up too many words. They're all written down. I don't know why I'm struggling. Anyway, we're going to jump back in time slightly just to see how Prost had been getting on in the big old world of Formula One while Senna was busy having rivalries in the junior categories. Prost has signed for McLaren. In his first season in the sport, whilst not groundbreaking, is nothing to be sniffed at. Entering 13 races across the season, Prost picked up points in 4 Grand Prix and finished the season on the same points tally as two-time world champion Emerson Fittipaldi. That's all right, isn't it? First go round.
Can you do the two-time world champ dance?
You can see it, everyone.
Love
Two-time world champ. Right. Whilst it was generally considered a good rookie year, Prost also had his issues. The most notable being breaking his wrists in a crash during a practice session at Kyalami. Similarities there drawn between, of course, Lance Stroll and Prost.
The same person.
Very similar. Let's hope that Stroll goes on to achieve 4 world titles. Despite having another 2 seasons on his contract, Prost decided to leave McLaren for Renault. He said in an interview that the team seemed to blame him for many of the incidents when he felt the car had a lot of reliability issues. In 1981, Prost partners up alongside late-breaking legend René Arnoux, which immediately gets off to an absolutely awful start, both on track and behind the scenes. Prost was faster than René, he's more experienced, René, right? He had a lot more races under his belt, but Prost was immediately so much faster than him. But Alain's season was something of a DNF or podium type season. Out of 15 Grand Prix, Prost retired from 9 of these races, but was never off the podium when he actually finished. After taking his first ever Grand Prix victory at his home Grand Prix in France, he said he had a change of mindset, being quoted saying, "Before, you thought you could do it. Now you know you can." After a very topsy-turvy season, he ended the year in 5th place, only 7 points away from Nelson Piquet in the news for rather unfortunate reasons recently, Nelson.
Who?
You racist.
Oh, yeah.
Who won the championship that year. Over the next few seasons with Renault, it just got better and better for Prost. Prost won the first 2 Grand Prix of the 1982 season, in South Africa where Prost recovered from losing a wheel, and in Brazil where he finished 3rd, but was awarded the win after Piquet and Keke Rosberg were disqualified. He finished in the points on 4 other occasions. And folks, if you're not familiar with old school Formula 1, it was much harder to finish in the points. You know, it wasn't like what you see now with Verstappen, Hamilton, Ferraris, where they finish in the points every single Grand Prix unless they have a DNF. I think only the top 6, right, got points back then, and points were much smaller and awarding. So if you had a reliability issue or something went wrong, you were regularly not in the points. So that's why you're thinking, well, he won 4 titles. How come he only finished in the points 4 times that season? It's very normal, very standard. Anyway, he didn't win again after finishing the points on 4 different occasions. Despite retiring from 7 races, Prost improved on his driver's championship position, finishing in 4th that season. But his final year at Renault in 1983, whilst he did improve his championship position on track, it all started to fall apart with management. Prost earned a further 4 victories for Renault during the season and finished 2nd in the 1983 Drivers' Championship, 2 points behind resident racist Nelson Piquet. Piquet and the Brabham team overhauled Prost and Renault in the last few races of the season. Prost, who felt the team had been too conservative in developing the car, found himself increasingly at odds with Renault's management, who made him the scapegoat for failing to win a championship. 2 days after the South African Grand Prix, Renault fired Prost, and he promptly re-signed with McLaren for the 1984 season. What do you think of that, folks? Odd that, such a prolific driver, moving forward, winning races regularly, was just booting out of the team.
He made a habit of getting fired.
He did. We're going to get onto that later. He wasn't the first time he gets fired in his career.
I'm sorry, you said that he called them out.
He did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, he had a bit of a habit of that. Not saying it was necessarily.
He spoke his mind.
Yeah, I'm not saying it was wrong, but he didn't. Fernando Alonso, in that sense, he didn't keep it to himself, did he? If the car wasn't up to scratch and didn't meet his talents, he told them about it, and then they fired him.
I'm really good. Your car's not very good. You've let me down. Get out the door, Alan.
All right, bye.
Bye. Back to McLaren I go. Please, Ron, let me in. Any thoughts on that one, Ben?
Yeah, I always find Prost's early career absolutely fascinating because going back to actually the previous point, in that I think if Prost debuts in Formula One a couple of years earlier than what he does, let's say 78 rather than 80, I'm convinced that he wins the championship in either 81, 82, 83, because he was very good in those 3 years. And points away in each of those 3 seasons, particularly 82 was a complete lottery as to who was going to win that season. And it felt, Renault were close. They were really close. Like, they were the first team to introduce turbocharged power units in Formula One, and everyone else in the early 80s was catching up to get there. And it felt like, Renault as the first adopters of this should be ahead of the curve in that, and they should be winning these titles, and they could never quite get over the line. Obviously it completely breaks down in 83, and certainly back in those early 80 days, Renault were, I don't know what the right way to say this is, but Renault were incredibly tied to the country of France, in that it was, if you were being outspoken about the team, it was almost an insult on the country itself. I know that a lot of national newspapers turned on Prost when he started to speak out against the team in 83. And it's very difficult. So it's not quite just the team and him had a falling out. It's the ramifications of that were quite large. But obviously him going back to McLaren, as I'm sure you'll go into, not a bad idea.
Yeah, we'll get onto that right now, actually. So right then, we have made it back to 1984, and I've already told you that Prost was resigning for his former team, McLaren. What of our young Brazilian sensation? Well, after multiple trials and offers from teams, some test roles, some roles where he wouldn't have control of what he wanted, he signed for Tolman. In his first season, he massively impressed the field and outdrove what many thought the car was capable of. But this is the season where mild friction between Prost and Senna first shows its glimpses. The most notable occasion where Senna outdrove his car was at the Monaco Grand Prix. Senna's best result of the season came at this Monaco Grand Prix, the first wet weather race of the season. He qualified 13th on the grid, but he made steady progress in climbing through the field, passing Niki Lauda for second on lap 19. He quickly began to cut the gap to race leader Alain Prost, but he could never attack Prost because the race was stopped on lap 31 for safety reasons as the rain had grown far too heavy. At the time the race was stopped, Senna was catching Prost by about, wait for it folks, not 1, not 2, no, 4 seconds a lap he was catching Prost. And remember, Prost is in a McLaren, Senna's in a Tolman, right? There's a big difference there. And he felt that he could easily have taken the victory, and that first win is going to have to wait. This was the closest that the two would come for a little while, both on and off track. Prost finished runner-up in the 1984 season. He lost the World Championship to Lauda, his teammate, in the final race of the season in Portugal by half a point. Despite winning 7 races to Lauda's 5, that half-point difference came because the Monaco Grand Prix was cut short due to the weather. In 1985, Lotus had taken notice of Senna's great start in Formula 1 and signed him on a multi-year deal. The good form continued for Ayrton. At the second race of the year, held in Portugal, Senna took pole and converted this to take his very first Formula 1 victory. This quickly recognised Senna as a championship contender and a threat to those at the top. But finally, it was Prost who was taking the big step up, picking up 5 Grand Prix wins and only finishing once off the podium. Alain had done enough to finally take home his first world title, and had beaten the legendary driver Lauda after being defeated the year prior. Senna would have to settle for 4th place. In 1986, our two protagonists are both once again on the up. Prost is paired against that sexy Scandinavian man, Keke Rosberg, and Senna is making the most out of his Lotus. But again, it's Alain Prost who beats the fierce rivals around him to claim his second championship back-to-back. Senna, though, has gone one step further than his previous season, and now sits 3rd, only 15 points off the top. Now, we spoke about this really briefly in an episode recently. I think, Ben, it was just you and me, and we did a kind of a pump the brakes. And I said that Prost was the most underrated driver of all time when it comes to world champions. Look at the teammates he went up against, even before we've got to Senna as a teammate, right? He's gone against Lauda, he's gone against Rosberg and others. It's quite an amazing lineup of drivers that he's had to battle against, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we mentioned that if you look at his weakest drivers that he came up against, it would be a great list if they were the strongest ones. So certainly Prost had that huge competition. 84 against Lauda's a classic example where Prost probably had the pace to win that championship. He ends up half a point behind, but just a great list of teammates all throughout his career.
In 1987, this was the final year before our two races legends come head-to-head for the first time. Prost has his worst year in Formula 1 since debut, finishing only 4th in the standings, which is...
Washed.
Yeah, right? Oh, 4th place. Get out, mate. Awful. He still managed 3 victories that year. Senna, in his final year at Lotus, actually managed to beat Prost in the standings and finished 3rd. Now we get to 1988, and that's where the drama really starts. It's 1988, and McLaren are looking for a new teammate to partner up with their star boy and now 2-time world champion, Alain Prost. Funny enough, it's Alain who turns to McLaren management and suggests that they bring in Ayrton Senna to sit alongside him. Both drivers come across as incredibly excited to work with one another, and the season does get off to a flyer. Most believed that Prost was going to dominate the field. The MP4-4 was the best Formula 1 car ever created at this point, and with this lineup, it was hard to see a way to beat Prost. However, Senna wasn't having any of it and wanted to stamp his authority on the team from day one. In the first 7 rounds, Senna and Prost trade victories, and come round 8, at the midway point held in Germany, Prost leads Senna by only 3 points. At this point in their relationship, there was still a lot of respect, and neither driver had been hostile to one another. Very much similar to how the Hamilton-Rosberg drama began, right? They kind of knew each other from their racing, had seen each other now for a long time in racing, and of course, became teammates, and actually got off to a really, really positive, friendly relationship. A lot of similarities between them. The sun is now blinding.
It just started coming
Brilliant.
blind us.
But going back to the Monaco Grand Prix in 1988, that would see a changing of the tide, and is most fondly remembered by Senna fans. Ayrton stepped up his ability to a whole new level on the Saturday, and after putting in an astonishing qualifying lap, he qualified 1.4 seconds clear of Prost. Imagine that happening now in today's terms, but imagine it happening over a 2-time world champion, right? Like, Senna had won a couple of races at this point. He was not in the big leagues that we know of him now. And he beats Prost by 1.4 seconds. Ben, that is just dumbfounding at this time, right?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. There's not even a modern example you can compare it to. But obviously we know Monaco's not the largest circuit in the world. So 1.4 seconds there might be the equivalent of 2 seconds at a place like Spa. And the onboard of that lap is one of the most replayed videos that we have in Formula One, and rightly so. It's artistry, right? It's majestic.
Harry, it's your love life, Monaco Grand Prix, isn't it? You know, you've got a real affinity with the walled city. What do you think about the 1.4 second gap?
I don't know where you're going with that, but it's one of the greats. I'm a bit of a nerd here. Isn't the onboard actually of 89?
I mean, I don't know. I didn't watch the onboard in my research.
Anyway, still, also a good lap. I don't think the 88 is available on board, but still, that's a big old gap.
Big old gap.
If people are worried about Red Bull domination these days, have a look at that.
Oh, he's had another go at Lewis Hamilton.
Or of Lewis Hamilton domination. I don't, take your pick of Michael Schumacher domination. Jeez.
Right. This was the moment that Prost knew Senna was not just an apprentice, but in fact a real rival. Someone he would have to put all his energy into beating. Their relationship was also beginning to show signs of strain when the pair were interviewed together towards the end of the season. Senna, when asked about the pair, is quoted saying, "We have good fun, and the championship is heating up." But Prost said, "We fight. Maybe we have to fight outside the car too." Senna replied, "There can only be one winner." That's fighting talk.
Have him.
A little punch-up between the two. There used to be a lot more punch-ups in Formula One. Don't see them too often anymore, right?
You don't. Not necessarily a bad thing, but still.
I don't know. A little bit
of fisting. It's funny when F1 drivers fight because they always have the helmets on.
And they're also a little bit like, I've never punched anyone before in my life, so they kind of go, "Oh, I've got you on the head."
They never commit to it because they break the knuckles.
Yeah, it's always the side of the hand on the top. Got you. Anyway, but in Formula One, results speak much louder than words. In the penultimate race of the season, at the Japanese Grand Prix, Senna had a shocking start, falling back to 14th place. But within 4 laps, Senna had made up 10 places and was hunting down his teammate, who was comfortably in the lead. In dramatic Senna fashion, he caught Prost, dived down the inside of Turn 1, and took the lead of the Grand Prix, going on to win the race. And with it, he won his first world title. And in doing so, he had rewritten the record books, breaking the record for most wins in a single season. The previous owner of that record at the time, Alain Prost. So that's got a sting.
Oof.
Harry, what did you make of the way that Senna held his own against Prost in their first season together?
Very impressive. I've got to say that the if you haven't watched the Japanese GP from that year, would recommend it. Go and watch it because do it. It's pretty impressive from Senna. Because if you think nowadays a driver bottles a championship finale start like that and where do you fall back to?
14th.
You think, it's all over. We're done. And I know the car was ridiculously quick over
his teammate's still driving it.
Exactly. But to catch Prost having fallen back to 14th and overtake him is it's very impressive. And I think that might have stung a little bit for Alain, especially losing that record as well at the same time.
Ben, what are your thoughts on that first season for Senna against Prost? He held his own.
He did, and the Lotus days implied that he would, but you've still got to see it. And as you say, Prost had already won titles, and Senna had won races rather than won titles. So there was that experience edge for Prost. But that whole '88 season was just how contrasting styles can create one of the greatest rivalries of all time, because Prost and Senna were just so completely different in their racing style. And Senna always had the pace edge. He always had the pace advantage. And that Japanese Grand Prix that you speak about really proved it. But how that worked out over the course of a season, factoring in DNFs and Prost knowing how much to push the car, just created such a fascinating season.
The prime example is Monaco '88, right? Because Senna was so quick, like way quicker than Prost, and then he bins it in the race, and Prost wins. And it's they're the two different
speed versus consistency again, right?
Yeah, tortoise versus the hare. No, he's not.
It's a very quick tortoise.
I'm not calling Alain Prost a tortoise. Right, move on.
Good. Just one of the most decorated drivers of all time.
Right, don't matter.
Good. Right, as we move into 1989, there still wasn't much hostility between the two champions, but Prost was eager to reclaim the top spot and prove he was the number one man in Formula One. But this fighting fair mentality didn't last long. It was only round 2 in the San Marino Grand Prix that the tensions began to escalate. The team, in a very surprising fashion, agreed that whoever was ahead going out of Turn 1 would then not be challenged by the other driver for the remainder of the Grand Prix. So, it's lights out, and it's Senna that leads through Turn 1. At this point, it seemed like a done deal, but when Gerhard Berger crashed heavily at Tamburello, causing a red flag, this would therefore mean there'd be a second red start. Can you see where this is going, folks? This time around,
no.
oh no, indeed.
Oh, no.
This time around, Prost absolutely aced the start, and he leads through turn 1. But Senna felt because he led the first race start, he should have ascendancy within the team, and he had the right to overtake Alain, which he immediately did. And this absolutely infuriated Prost, as he felt he had been respectful of the agreement until that very moment. This was the moment when the rivalry shifted, from a fierce but respected fight to a very bitter battle, where each driver would do whatever it takes to beat the other. Then, much like the season before, Prost and Senna exchanged wins throughout the first 7 rounds, but throughout many points of the season, Prost made it clear he really wasn't happy, complaining that his Honda engine simply didn't work as well as Senna's, who had built up an excellent relationship with Honda when he was driving for Lotus back in 1987. But after the 4th Grand Prix in Mexico, fortunes started to shift in Prost's favour. He went on to win 3 of the next 4 races, while Senna experienced DNF after DNF. Retirements for reliability really began to hinder Senna's title hopes, and by the time they arrived at the Spanish Grand Prix, 3 races from the end of the season, Prost led by 24 points. So, with 3 races to go, Senna needed to win every single race left in order to take the championship. A tall order, but not impossible, and especially for someone like Senna. Senna began well, winning the Spanish Grand Prix in Jerez ahead of Prost, who finished second. However, the following race in Japan would not be so clear-cut, and many F1 fans will know it infamously well. We're back in Japan. Senna arrived at the track knowing all he had to do was win, something he was used to at this point. Senna began the weekend well, taking pole position and continuing an incredible qualifying run. Now this is mad, right? Remember the 1.4 from Monaco? He beat out second place Prost this time by 1.7 seconds, which is astounding, again, when you're beating a multiple-time world champion by such a large margin. I even wrote here, quite cheekily, talk about car domination, Lewis Hamilton.
You're having a pop at me for saying that.
Oh, he's
written it down.
Pop, it's showtime. This was Senna's 12th pole in 15 races, by the way, which is, pretty mad. So the lights go out. But pole position quickly means nothing as Prost gets away brilliantly, swooping into the league ahead of the Brazilian. Prost always excelled in race conditions over qualifying, and he immediately creates a 6-second gap to Senna. Ayrton saw his championship hopes fading and began putting in qualifying-style laps over and over to catch Prost. The gap gets smaller, and then, on lap 47 of the race, Senna catches Prost, making a move on Alain, diving down the inside of the Casio Triangle chicane. It is said that Prost saw Senna going for the dive and intentionally turns across the track early, causing them to both collide and bringing them to a standstill. Prost immediately jumps out of his car, believing that both cars have sustained severe damage, and he believes Senna was going to do the same. But Senna managed to keep his engine running and drove off through the escape road and managed to get himself back into the Grand Prix. As expected, Prost was furious at this point, so to counteract what Senna was doing, Prost ran to the race director explaining that Senna did not follow the track, that he cut the chicane and should be disqualified from the race. Senna took the checkered flag and celebrated, for he thought that he had just won his 7th win of the season and kept that title fight alive. But not so fast, Ayrton. He had indeed been disqualified from the Grand Prix by race stewards, but not until after the race had ended. And I guess some things never change, right?
Cheers, FIA.
I mean, back then it was FISA, right?
Cheers, FISA.
Now, FISA, who were the governing body at the time, came under fire for this. Senna believed that Jean-Marie Balesque had intentionally disqualified Ayrton from the Grand Prix in order to award his fellow Frenchman the world title. Unfortunately, these claims fell on deaf ears, and Prost walked away with his 3rd world title. Now, Ben, we've just seen almost a very similar controversy with race control and the governing body. They haven't really learned, have they?
I mean, this might annoy some people, but the most recent form of controversy related to the FIA pales in comparison to this one, because this... I don't know how to diplomatically say this, but this was ridiculous. I mean, it's the equivalent. Imagine, and I'm not saying do this, but if you illegally download a movie, it's the equivalent of being put away for life as a result of doing that. Skipping the chicane and getting disqualified is madness. Take on like a 5-second penalty, fine. But could you imagine that happening in today's Formula One, where a disqualification happened from skipping a chicane and not following the track correctly?
The worst part wasn't this, of course. The skipping off the chicane was called the safety road. He took the safety road to get back to the track. I don't know why, unless he picks up his car and levitates it back to where he went off. Harry, what?
Well, I've seen. If you've not watched the Senna movie, by the way,
brilliant
which
movie.
100% recommend.
Really good.
Well, it's a documentary, I guess, but there's bits in that about this incident, and Ron Dennis afterwards is defending Senna, which you'll get onto because Prost is off. But they're showing showing video of other drivers skipping the chicane, and also the argument was, what do you want him to do? Reverse back onto the track. So reverse on the track and then go do the chicane. It's just...
I mean, footage shows stewards pushing the car through the safety road to get him back on the track the other way, right? He almost had no control over it.
I can imagine F1 Twitter. If Twitter was a thing in 1989.
Oh, God.
Also, this also might be controversial, but it was an ambitious move from Senna, but Prost 100% turned in on him.
Well, that's what they say. I'm not going to start making decisions left, right, and centre, but go and watch the footage, folks. It's available to watch. Really interesting. And we're going to move on from that slight bit of controversy. But as you can understand here, tensions between the two were absolutely through the roof. Because of this, Prost decided he had enough, especially as Harry just mentioned that Ron Dennis had been defending Senna in this moment, leaving McLaren and moving to join Ferrari for the 1990 season. Famously being quoted, "It becomes impossible to work with Ayrton." With this move, you might think that this might be the end of the story, but quite the contrary. For the third season in a row, it was Senna and Prost who exchanged victories, Senna winning 6 to Prost's 5. The difference maker, as we mentioned earlier, consistency. Alain had been picking up the points where they mattered throughout the season, so despite having one less win, the fight was very much on for the title. So if you could predict just one place at this point for the title showdown to take place, where are you going to guess,
Japan?
Oh, he's nailed it in one. That's right. We're back at Suzuka, just like 1 year previous. I'm not sure the construction site had begun yet. Right, so how the tongues have tabled, as Michael Scott would say. This time, it was Senna in the driving seat, and if both drivers retire, it would be Ayrton who would walk away with the title. In quali, Senna once again sits on pole, showing true dominance on a Saturday, but weirdly enough, the pole position slot has been moved to the dirty side of the track, something you rarely see in modern-day Formula One. Both Senna and McLaren protested this change, but it was our friend Jean-Marie Balesque who got the final say and rejected their protests. And this meant that Prost in P2 got the clean side of the grid and the better run into turn 1. I mean, it's just endless controversy at this point.
Honestly, Twitter would have blown up.
Lost
1989 to 1990, it would have been hell. We're in 2021 times 3. It would have been awful.
Yeah, like World War entirely in a Formula One race. Honestly, awful. And I've lost my point now of where I was going to be on this great little bit here. So that's I found it. Everyone, we're fine.
Phew.
So anyway, as we get to this point, everyone is ready for a title showdown. But then the absolute worst thing for controversy imaginable happened. As commentary legend Murray Walker screamed over the action, "Oh, it's happened immediately. This is amazing, but I feared it was absolutely predictable. Prost and Senna go into turn 1 side by side, and they collide so heavily. In the same case of once again, Senna has not yielded from a move, and Prost has gone, well, no thanks, sunshine."
I also think side by side is being generous.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, again, go watch the footage. That is a little bit kind. Anyway, they collide, and both cars get set into the gravel trap. And this was the absolute worst point in Senna and Prost's relationship. Two of Formula One's greatest drivers had shattered any form of relationship that they had built, and in the following season of 1991, Senna was dominant, went on to win his third and final title, while Prost, in an uncompetitive Ferrari, only managed 5th. Now, could you imagine, for example, another season, 2 seasons of Verstappen and Hamilton going at it toe-to-toe like this, right? It would be the end of the world as we know it.
No.
Ben, how do you think that... how do you think that they were reacting? How do you think they were feeling at that time? How do you feel about these moments that went on? They're so historic and famous for us F1 fans.
It feels about right that the way that one of the greatest rivalries of all time kind of came to an end was thanks to Ferrari. So there's another box ticked for things that Ferrari are good for in their existence. But yeah, it's maybe it needed a break at that point because it was just. Fundamentally, they were just so different. I know I've already mentioned it, but they were just so fundamentally different but also in a few ways exactly the same in terms of their eagerness to win. The methods in which they attempted to achieve it might have varied from time to time and in terms of their styles, but ultimately a lot of these just come down to it being 2 ultra competitive great drivers, and there just wasn't room for both of them at certain points in their careers.
Quite literally on track as well, you argue.
Exactly.
Due to Prost continually blaming Ferrari for a poor car, the at the time 3-time world champion was sacked before the season can even finish. There it is, folks.
Shock.
The second sacking of Alain Prost, who was a 3-time world champion. Again, can you imagine this happening to, I don't know, Hamilton, Schumacher, Be ridiculous, wouldn't it?
Never mind Ferrari. The rest of the 90s will go great for you.
Brilliant. Good. Okay. Prost was arguably at his all-time career low at this point, and in 1992 wouldn't be much better either for Senna nor Prost. Prost took a year out of the sport, and a dominant Williams car meant that Senna couldn't even get into the top three into the standings. But in 1993, the old rivalry reignites, Sam, is how you say it. I wrote the script. Reignites for one last time. Prost had agreed a contract to join the very dominant Williams team and was back at the top of the sport, and he even included in his contract that Senna would not be allowed to join him as a teammate. Senna got wind of this and in a press conference criticised the politics of the sport in an audacious move he called Prost a coward. Yeah, harsh. Burn. When the season kicked off, the rivalry was in full force. Senna and Prost clashed on many occasions throughout the year, but to Senna's dismay, the car simply wasn't able to hang with the Williams, and Prost claimed his fourth and final world title in Formula One and then retired from the sport. Senna was never able to quite get the better of him on track once again. And the sad thing about this rivalry was that once Prost had retired from racing, he regularly met with Ayrton and was quoted saying that he found a new side to Senna, one he had never seen before, and said they very much started to become friends. But what could be a brilliant relationship between two racing legends was cut short. In 1994 in San Marino, Senna had one of the most infamous incidents in racing history, crashing at Tamarello and, of course, sadly losing his life. As for Prost in all of this, he was actually a pallbearer during Ayrton's funeral and helped carry Ayrton to his final resting place. And many years later, during an interview, Prost said the following: "I look back on how he was when we were rivals as a compliment. I came to understand that Ayrton's main motivation, almost his sole motivation, was to focus on me and on beating me. And that's why when we were on the podium together in Australia in 1993, when I stopped just a few seconds later, he was already a different person. That would be his last ever victory, and Senna insisted that Prost stand with him on the top step of the podium after Alain received his runner-up trophy, physically pulling him up to the stand and to stand there arm in arm together. Prost said that souvenir of our relationship is what he carries with him today." Harry, is this the biggest rivalry in Formula One history that we've ever seen?
Yeah, it is, isn't it? Because there have been many rivalries in F1 history, but everyone, when we were having the Hamilton Rosberg or Hamilton Verstappen, everyone's like, "Oh, is this the new Senna Prost?" It's the one everyone refers back to.
The OG.
I mean, it's not even the OG because there are other great rivalries before that, but it's just the most infamous one, I guess. It's the one everyone ever will remember.
Yeah, I agree. Ben, would you put this up there as the number one rivalry of all time, or have you got another one in mind?
No, it's the number one rivalry of all time, and in all honesty, it might be a fight for second, but it's not close. This is by far the greatest rivalry of all time. It could have been rivaled at a few later points in Formula One history. Certainly, if things had gone differently in Vettel and Hamilton's career, could that have been a rivalry on that level potentially? Schumacher, as much as we joke about David Coulthard being his greatest rivalry of all time, Schumacher, I don't think Schumacher ever had that equivalent. He had, breaks here and there where it was Hakkinen, and then might have been Coulthard temporarily, and then it became Montoya, and then it was Alonso. But there was never a Villeneuve to add for Harry's pleasure. But there was never really an extended equal to Schumacher. So we've had great drivers since Senna and Prost, but I don't think any of them have had an extended rivalry with a peer. This is by far the greatest rivalry of all time.
Final question before we leave it for now. And I know that this feels like maybe an obvious question at first, but if you look into it slightly deeper, Harry, who do you feel came out on top of the rivalry?
Oof. That's a real tricky question. If you're going to go on results, I guess Prost did. I don't think you. This is me sitting on the fence, isn't it? But I don't think you can say someone came out on top. Like we've already said, that they were so different in their approach that I don't know if you can. I don't know if you can be like.
I think morally, maybe Senna elevated himself because of the way that obviously Prost stormed into the FISA office and demanded.
But I mean, yes, there is that. There's a political aspect, but then there's Senna lets himself down morally by running Prost off the road. in that sense, they're almost as bad as each other. But again, it's two different approaches, isn't it? It's running your rival off the road. Although I guess Prost did in '89, but running your rival off the road and going to the stewards about it. Yeah, that's too hard for me to. I know I don't answer many things, but that is too hard for me to answer, I think.
Okay, Ben, we'll come to you then, because I know that you'll probably give maybe a slightly more definite answer.
Probably.
Who do you feel came out on top?
I will give a more definite answer. I think that the winner of the rivalry was shown in the 1991 season, which Senna dominated at McLaren after Prost had left. I think Senna wins the rivalry based on the fact that he stuck with the team. He stayed with the team and Prost left. Like, he was almost the last man standing in that sense. And where McLaren were able to have a dominant season in 91, Senna's still there to take advantage of it. Prost, as you went through, is struggling in an underperforming Ferrari. So I think Senna won the rivalry. Certainly, an interesting point you raised earlier in terms of their junior careers and some of the rules and points around that. It became true in the late 80s in Formula One as well, because we saw that you only took your however many best races into consideration in terms of the championship standings. Prost wins both the 88 and the 89 seasons if you take into account full points. The only reason Senna wins 88 is because all of Prost's points weren't taken into account because of the rules at the time. So yeah, it could have been very different just based on one rule here or there, where maybe Prost wins both of those championships. Prost's the one that sticks around at McLaren and Senna goes elsewhere. But I think just based on Senna being with the team after Prost goes and winning that championship in 91, that for me gives the edge to Ayrton Senna.
It's a good answer. Very fair point. Well, folks, we've come to the end of our very first short view back to the past. What do you think? Was that a nice chat? You enjoy it?
It was a nice chat. And also, Sam very kindly rehearsed this before he brought it to us and said, oh, it's only like 20, 25 minutes. An hour and 4.
Yeah, with debate.
I know. I'm just saying. It was healthy conversation.
You say we spent 40 minutes.
I'm saying that the script, if you just cut all of you out, is about half an hour at max.
Wow.
Sorry, guys. Sorry about that. We've wasted half an hour of your time. Or not.
All right, then.
Oh, well, up to opinion. But well put together. So, I mean, that was very well researched and a great rivalry to look at as the first in this series.
It's like getting good feedback off your teacher.
Yeah.
You know?
Round of applause for Sam.
Oh. Hey! Right, so it's really good.
You're welcome.
It's like a good school report. Hopefully I'll get McDonald's on the way home as a treat. Ooh. Anyway, folks, let us know what you think. That is the very first. Obviously, we're going to be looking to a new season. Some of these episodes will be exclusive to Patreon as well. So if you want to hear the entire full season and every rivalry that we're going to be looking at over this season, then you're going to have to subscribe, I'm afraid, but it does massively support us. And we're able to do things like get these new microphones that we're now all on. We've got a great new soundboard. We look jazzy. We're here on YouTube, right? You can see us if you wanted to watch this. And if you wanted to get involved in that aspect, Ben is auctioning off, so to speak, the name of his microphone over on social media. Head over to our Instagram, Late Breaking F1 Podcast, and Ben's post his lovely face, and you can name his mic. Most likes on your comment will see the name. There's some great ones on there at the moment on there, Ben. You got any favourites that have come up?
Well, I think currently leading the way is Mikey Massey, but there are some great... Mike Schumacher, just based on it being a Sure Mike, that's a great one. I think the one that probably made me laugh the most was just someone put Spain Turn 1. If it can be as great as Spain Turn 1, it'll be a good mic.
I want it to be Clive's Pickle.
I also want it to be Clive's Pickle.
That's a sensational name.
That's a few votes on it as well. Yeah.
Right. Good. Anyway, that's it from us, folks. Thank you so much for listening. Make sure you do go and check out the Patreon if you'd like to get the full series of these episodes. They're going to be coming out over the next couple of months or so. Also, you can check out the merch store. The link's in the description. Thank you, Harry. Join the Discord as well. Lots of chit-chat going over there with over 1,700 lovely members. And we're going to be back to our normal proceedings, of course, midweek, because we have got a preview to do of the Australian Grand Prix.
Oh, yeah.
Look at that. We're back to racing.
Yeah. Good point.
And also, Ben's going to be fully in control again. Well, with the intro, you'll still have soundboard. Oh, no. Anyway, so stick around for the action. We're here in video format as well, which is very odd. Hello. That's it from us, I think. In the meantime, I've been Samuel Sage.
I've been Ben Hocking.
And I've been Ayrton Prenner.
And remember, keep braking late.